Welcome to Roundabout Oxford, a podcast from the University of Mississippi Libraries.
Welcome back to Roundabout Oxford, the podcast of the University of Mississippi Libraries. Our focus in this episode, appropriately enough, is libraries and librarians. In our first segment, Christina Streeter talks with Roundabout Oxford's own Abbie Norris about eGrove. Later, we'll shine a spotlight on some of the people who work behind the scenes to keep the J.D. Williams Library running smoothly.
My name is Christina Streeter, and I am a library manager at the Idea Lab at the University of Mississippi Libraries. With me today, I have one of my colleagues from the University of Mississippi Libraries and one of our contributors to the podcast, Abbie Norris. Hey, Abbie, how's it going today?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So, Abbie, if you could introduce yourself with your full title, please.
Yes, so I am the Digital Initiatives Librarian and Assistant Professor here at the university.
Can you tell us, I know that one of your main focuses here at the library is something called eGrove. Can you tell us, what is eGrove?
eGrove is the university's institutional repository. And an institutional repository is essentially an online archive where we collect the intellectual output of faculty, staff, students, departments at the University of Mississippi and provide free online access to these materials. So people worldwide can access things that are produced at the university for free.
Can you tell us a little bit about, when we talk about intellectual output, what does that mean exactly? What are we, if someone was to hop onto eGrove, what are they going to find?
We carry a really broad range. Essentially, anything you can imagine that is born digital or has been digitized at the university can go into eGrove. So we have things like theses and dissertations from our graduate students and our honors undergraduate students. We have several open access journals. We have the library's digital archive collections. We have administrative reports like reports on new faculty. We have data sets, oral histories. The list goes on and on and on.
You mentioned open access. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know that that's not like your main goal, but like a lot of people might not be familiar with what that means, like an open access journal or, information that we have out there.
Yeah, so open access, kind of broadly speaking, is material created and provided for free for anyone in the world to access. So when you think of a typical online journal, you think you have to go through your library or you have to pay to access the article. And if something is provided open access, that barrier doesn't exist. So it's able to reach a broader span of people and make research much more accessible to people all around the world.
And who can upload items into this collection? Like, how does it get decided what items go into eGrove?
So anyone who is affiliated with the university can submit items for upload into eGrove. So that includes faculty, staff, graduate students, undergraduate students, if they have a faculty or staff sponsor. And then we also have things that are broadly from departments or from administration.
Why should a student, faculty member, or department consider contributing to this archive?
Yeah, so I see this really as twofold, benefiting both the researcher and the university. So for people who submit materials, it's a way for you to get what you have produced online and for people to go find it and see specifically, what you have produced and what you have put your time into creating. And then also from the creator's perspective, if you store it on eGrove, you don't have to store it on your own website. And so people spend, hundreds of dollars hosting things on their own websites when they could just submit them to the repository and we can provide them as a service from the library, and you can just, if you publish a journal, you can have the most current issue of your journal up on your own website, and we can host the back issues of the journal on eGrove. And then from a university perspective, I think eGrove is a really great way of showing the academic world and kind of the globe as a whole what exactly is going on here at the university. I had no idea the amount of research and all of the different interesting fields that were here. When I started working, I had no idea that we had the Blues Archive. I had no idea that we had the American Institute of Certified Public Accounting collection. And so it's really just a way of showing, the University of Mississippi is here. We're doing really interesting research, and here you can access it.
And I know that personally on our end, on this podcast, this is actually how we have been able to kind of mine for ideas, because it is kind of like a gathering place for intellectual output from the university. So, when we're looking for, if we have something that we have in mind for a theme, we've actually been able to kind of sift through some of the materials, find some really interesting dissertations. And again, I've experienced the same thing myself, going through eGrove and finding like a lot of gems. And it's not all, there's a lot of historical content in there. Like you mentioned, the oral histories, and there's some amazing videos that tell just amazing stories from people who have experienced different events here at the university. Now, there is actually a map and counter on eGrove homepage where you can see the number of downloads in the last hour. So as of now, in the last hour, there have been 140 downloads on a Monday morning. So how many downloads are we averaging on a daily basis, would you say?
Yeah, so I just checked that number this morning, and I'm really glad I did, because it slumped a little bit during the winter break, but in December, we were averaging about 3,000 to 3,500 downloads a day, which is about double from when I checked in October. So it's been really interesting watching over the course of the last year how much eGrove's usage has increased.
What kind of items are being downloaded most often? Like, that's a lot of downloads for like one university. And what do you think, dissertations? Is it research topics? Is it photos? What do you think is being downloaded most?
Our most popular items tend to be theses and dissertations, either from the graduate school or from our undergraduate research. We also have a couple of journals that are pretty popular, the Journal of Rural Social Sciences, and then the Undergraduate Research Journal, and then our accounting collection. Those typically are the subjects that are most often in our top 10 downloads.
I want to make this clear for some people who might not realize this, is that this isn't just being downloaded by people in Oxford, Mississippi, or even from like our satellite campuses. This isn't even just getting downloaded from Mississippi. Where are you seeing people, like from where are these researchers downloading our content?
So we are very proud of saying that we have had downloads in 6 continents. We haven't had a download in Antarctica yet. We're waiting for the researchers down there. We really see downloads from all over the world. We are able to see the top countries per download, and some of the top countries are China, India, the UK, France. So it really is all across the world. Many of our downloads do come from the southeastern region of the United States, I think because we have so many regionally specific research topics. But yeah, it's really all over the world. People are downloading every day.
And that's just, that's constant. Like, even while we're watching now, someone downloaded from New Zealand. We've had downloads from Asia, Puerto Rico, and it's, again, that's every hour. It's from around the world. So I think someone had shared with me at one point that we've even had, people trying to find some of the authors of some of these dissertations and theses because they wanted to be able to host them at an event or a discussion in another part of the world because they found the information here.
Yeah, which is really exciting. We recently had the host of a conference reach out about an undergraduate thesis, and they were hosting a conference in South America and wanted to invite that student to come give talk. So that's a really great example of how our research is being discovered by people and then being used and kind of helping the world see what is being done at the university.
So if a student or faculty, campus organization, department, someone in those realms would like to contribute to eGrove, could you sort of walk us through that process?
Yes. So on our website, which is egrove.olemiss.edu, we have a submission form, and you can go fill out the form. It'll ask you questions about what you're uploading, what your affiliation with the university is, how we can contact you. And when we've received that form, we will get in touch with you and schedule a meeting to kind of learn more about what you're trying to upload and walk you through the different structures that we have and the different ways we can present your information. And from there, it really is how much work you want to put in versus how much you want to lean on us for support. We have some people who are very involved who have gone through training and are able to upload their own content the way they want. And then we have some people who send us the files and we take care of all of the metadata, all of the uploads, and just make sure that the information is presented the way you want it. So it's a very customized process, but we love finding new people to work with and finding new materials to upload.
A lot has changed in the last year in how people are doing research during the pandemic. Have you seen any changes to how eGrove is being used by researchers?
Yes, so as I mentioned, our uploads have been increasing exponentially every few months or so. And in some ways, this is a product of the repository being around for longer. A year ago in January of 2020, we were just over a year old and we were still uploading things that had kind of been on previous repositories that the university had. And then we started uploading new content in January. And then in March, the pandemic started, and we were also at the same time uploading more and more content. And that's when we really saw usage increasing. And so we went from averaging around 300 downloads a day a year ago. So I guess that number has now increased tenfold, which is really exciting to see that happen over the course of a year. And then also the materials that people are downloading have changed. A year ago, we were seeing the majority of our top 10 downloads as things from the accounting collection, which makes sense because that is one of our biggest collections on eGrove. It's really robust and has a really great information for people in accountancy. And then over the last few months, that has switched to largely being theses and dissertations. And I think that that is a product of people wanting more open access research that they can access and use, because when things shut down in March, people no longer had access to their libraries, and libraries lost a lot of funding and really had to scramble and make hard decisions about things that they could and couldn't keep. And so open access became really important for students and faculty who were still doing their research and still had to find ways to continue their research, even if they no longer had the same level of access that they had a year ago.
I know a lot of researchers love being able to have physical access to physical copies from our archives and collections. And you mentioned the whole, the fact that, a lot of people lost access to their libraries. Even interlibrary loan continues to kind of be challenging during this time. Even though some libraries have reopened, like, for example, our stacks are still closed to the public. What are the benefits of having a digital archive option?
Yeah, so I love this question. As the digital librarian, obviously my job is very focused on digital materials, but I will always have a place in my heart for analog materials and analog items. And, there's at this point, it seems like an age-old debate of which is better, digital or analog. And I think that they are equally important and neither of them are going anywhere. And obviously for many researchers, if you have the opportunity to go in person and read a letter from the Civil War in a reading room, that experience can't necessarily be matched, but having a digital copy really opens the access opportunities, and it's access in two different ways. So the first is what I was talking about with just kind of general access. If you can't physically go somewhere, but you can access it online, that really opens up the amount of research that you are able to accomplish. And that helps researchers not have to go, spend a lot of money to travel to specific locations and make sure that they've checked all the boxes for all the things they need to pull from the stacks and get their research done in 3 days. And it also helps you be able to go back and reference something and reread and reread and reread. But then it also helps with access from the perspective of individuals with physical or mental impairments. So, if you are unable to read a letter using your eyes, going to a reading room and reading an old letter is not a viable option for you. But if there is a transcript available online, that helps you get your research done in a much more effective way. And we are working on increasing the accessibility, the digital accessibility of all of our material online, because the goal really is to have everyone be able to access our content and be able to use it.
I understand the team has added a number of new collections and items to eGrove over the last year, as you mentioned before. Could you give our listeners some highlights?
Yes, so some of my favorite collections that we've added over the last year include a number of journals. I mentioned that we had several open access journals. So we recently added Studies in English and Journal X, which is a discontinued English journal that was hosted and published by the Department of English here for about 40 years. And then we also have the Journal of Rural Social Sciences, the Journal of Contemporary Research and Education. So there are a lot of topics that people can go find journals about on eGrove. We also recently added the past 10 years of the student newspaper, the Daily Mississippian, and we are in the process of digitizing previous issues with the goal of having all 110 years available on eGrove one day. We also have a number of really interesting data sets. The most recent one is the Gulf Research Program data set, which is 35 gig, which is probably one of the largest, singular collections we have on eGrove. And then finally, we've uploaded a lot of really interesting oral histories over the last year, including the Queer Mississippi Project, Black Families of Yalobusha County, and Black Power at Ole Miss.
What's one of the most interesting things you've come across as you've uploaded items to eGrove?
I think that one of the things that caught my attention the most was the Civil War letters. In the spring, we were transcribing the collection of letters that we have. And it was fascinating to read these letters that were written, 150 years ago, but then were also written by people living in Confederate Mississippi who had extremely different perspectives from how we think today. And it was just fascinating reading kind of how they went about their everyday lives and how they talked about the war in a way that was so disjointed from acknowledging the humanity of enslaved peoples and, kind of how we view the Confederacy today. And so that was just absolutely fascinating. And I love kind of reading about the everyday lives of people. And so that's definitely one of the most interesting collections I've come across.
Do you have a favorite collection?
I think that right now my favorite collection is Queer Mississippi, just because, the words queer in Mississippi, you don't think of them as existing in the same sentence, but, this project really shows how there are a lot of people who identify as queer living in the state and advocating for the same rights and privileges as people who are heterosexual and have kind of always enjoyed these privileges. And I think what really struck me about this collection, I listened to a talk that was given by the creators, and one of the women who helped create the collection was talking about how this is such an advocacy for people who grow up in Mississippi and don't see themselves reflected in anyone they know and don't feel like they necessarily belong in the state as a queer person, but then, they find this collection, they find other queer Mississippians and see that they belong and who they are deserves to be advocated for and represented in this state. And so I think that it's really just such a wonderful resource and hopefully will help continue the dialogue of advocating for LGBTQ rights in Mississippi and in the South.
Do you think there's anything that would surprise our listeners to learn about eGrove?
From a contributor's perspective, I think that the most surprising thing people learn is that this is a service that's provided by the library, which means that if you want to put something up on eGrove, it is free for you to use. And the way that the system is built, we have a lot of things that are automated. We have peer review structures for journals and other things in place that typically, take a significant amount of time, a lot of different emails to put together. And so people have been kind of surprised and really grateful for the fact that, we're here and this is our job and we want to help you get this stuff up, and you don't have to spend a lot of money or spend a lot of time hosting these things on your own. And one of the things we are trying to advocate for is just knowledge of eGrove, because even today, we realize that people still don't know this resource is out there and are still buying their own website URLs or hosting things on other repositories. And then when they learn that eGrove is here, they wish that they had known it all along. So we're really just trying to get the word out there and reach out to as many faculty and staff as possible, because we think that it's a really great resource.
What is the greatest challenge of the work that you do here?
I think for me, it's making sure that there is fair and equitable representation across the university. I'm not a subject specialist. My colleagues in the digital initiatives department, one of them is a subject specialist, but we work broadly across all subjects. And that has been a huge learning curve for me. I'm trained as an archivist, I'm trained in the humanities. And so I'm much more likely to gravitate towards humanities materials because that's what immediately captures my interest. But I also want to make sure that the sciences and education and engineering are just as represented. And so over the last year and a half, I've had to learn a lot about different types of librarianship and different types of materials that are produced by different fields. And then also just keeping track of everything that is put out by the university, because typically the majority of the time, people don't come to us, we come to them. We see that a new journal is being hosted, or we see that a new podcast has been put out, and we email them and say, would you be interested in hosting this? And so it's constantly checking all of the department websites, watching for university press releases to make sure we are accurately capturing the life of the university and making sure that everyone is equally represented.
All right. So if our listeners would like to take a look at eGrove themselves, can you tell us where they can find it?
Yes. So eGrove is located at eGrove, egrove.olemiss.edu. And you can reach out to us by emailing us at egrove@olemiss.edu.
Thanks for joining us today, Abbie.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Have you ever wondered what librarians do in their free time? In our next segment, members of the J.D. Williams faculty and staff discuss some of their more intriguing hobbies. We begin with the captain of the ship, Dean of the Libraries, Cecilia Botero. When you're not working and being the dean of the library, what are some of the things that you like to do in your free time?
I do a lot of reading. We've always had pets. Unfortunately, we lost our doggies, so we don't have dogs at this time, but we have birds, which we've had for a number of years. So I own finches. I like them, and I miss them every time we lose them, and and we don't have any more, I always end up going back to get more because I miss their singing. You have to keep their cages clean. And they do love water, actually. And they make quite a mess when they get in that water. They're teeny little birds, but they splash all over the place. So we have 10 right now. So they're in 3 cages. And they just live in the cage near our kitchen so that they can keep me company while I cook.
So they sing while you cook?
They sing the minute you uncover them in the morning.
Okay.
And in fact, we live on a lake. And so the geese come in the morning. And the minute the geese comes, they don't sing, they just screech in the morning. Then the finches will start calling out to them.
So I'm Christina Torbert. I am the head of Continuing Resources and Acquisitions. I am also the subject specialist for philosophy and religion. There's a ministry of our church that does prayer shawls. So we're crocheting or knitting shawls that then the ministers, when they're allowed to go visit again, can take to folks that need prayers. And it's a way of surrounding our friends and in prayer in a physical way through these prayer shawls. So I mainly do crochet. I only do crochet. Actually, I've never learned to knit. And I've got a couple of patterns that I can do kind of mindlessly while I'm watching TV. I think the other day I counted, and I think I'm up to 10, though it might be 11 that I've done in the last year. I learned when I was young. My grandmother taught me when I was a girl, but then I kind of didn't do it for a long time. And 1 year after I got here at Oxford, actually, I had to have back surgery. And so I was like forced to sit still for 3 weeks. So I needed something to do with my hands, and I started doing crochet. So my boyfriend, Brian LaPrade, when I met him almost 7 years ago at the Oxford Blues Festival. At the time, he was a charter member of the Blues Foundation based up in Memphis. He'd been doing that a long time and knew a lot of blues musicians. And so he knows when they're having concerts and where they're having concerts. And so we go to a lot of blues concerts and festivals, and we've gone all over for them. But our most adventurous one was Notodden. We went to Notodden, Norway. It is the longest running European blues festival. The Norwegians love Mississippi blues. And we go to the North Mississippi Hill Country pretty much every year that they have it. They haven't had it for a couple of years, but there's one this year and Brian's excited, so we can't miss that.
Hi, I'm Gail Herrera, and I serve as the Assistant Dean for Technical Services and Automation here at the University of Mississippi Libraries. And I'm an amateur musician.
So our listeners might not be aware of this, but the reason why we're talking with Gail today is she's actually the person that helps create some of the soundtrack music for our podcast. She plays ukulele. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got started? Why uke?
I wish I had a really good story for that. I think I just fell in love with Israel Kamakaluole's music. And after my son was born, I played it over and over again. It's such calming, beautiful music. And there came a point 4 years ago where I thought, well, I'm just going to buy one and try it. The ease with which you can pick up the basics on a ukulele, it just makes it very accessible for so many people.
And you recently actually held a workshop through the Idea Lab here at the J.D. Williams Library. And so you do have some experience doing a little bit of like tutoring and teaching. Can you talk to me a little bit about what made you decide to do that?
Sure. Well, I mean, it really started a couple of years ago. 2 years ago, I thought, well, this is so much fun. I really need to find some other people to play with. I play with some guys in town who play guitars, but I thought it'd be really fun to have the ukulele jam. So I set up one here in Water Valley where I live, and we've been kind of gathering steam. So nobody in that group ever played ukulele before. We just kind of started doing it for fun, and it was a real hoot. And the more people you get together to do it with, the more fun it is. There are a lot of public libraries these days who get involved with this kind of music and making music and helping people with teaching So I thought it would be fun to cross over with the Idea Lab and see if there was any interest. I love music because music brings together people. It brings together people in so many interesting ways, but it's also really therapeutic. And I'll say during this time of COVID, it's been really helpful for me. It's a great therapy, whether it's for me or whether it's people getting together and having a bunch of fun. It's a lot of fun. I should probably also give a shout out to the music department because, although I've played and I played French horn through college, I never really had music theory. I've never taken a formal music class. Dr. Gardner and Dr. Latartera, I took both of their music theory classes, and that really, really helped put a bunch of pieces together for me that really let me enjoy music a lot this last year or two.
Do you ever work on any of your own music?
Sure. Actually, I was just working on one today for a sound file since you wanted to play something. I thought, well, I'll just figure out some backtracks, some backing tracks for this one that I did. That's I got a mellow little rhythm to it, and send it to you and see if you wanted to include it somewhere in the podcast.
Roundabout Oxford was developed and produced by Brian Corrigan, Taylor Fields, Alan Munchauer, Abbie Norris, Christina Streeter, and Alex Watson. This episode was narrated by Taylor Fields and Gail Herrera. Thank you for listening to Roundabout Oxford.